So hello, everybody. Welcome back to, I guess, cannabis technology. So I know that a lot of you are very, very interested in these issues. I think today we're going to be discussing the many, many ways that technology generally is going to be, if not has already begun to revolutionize our business. So Cannatech is a very, very broad term. But what I'd like to do is start with some, sort of to give you an understanding of how broad this is and how many aspects of the cannabis industry technology affects, starting with legalization. But beyond that, we have some very, very interesting panelists today with a wide range of technology that's being deployed right now, and the impact on our industry is going to be really, really huge. So I'm going to start with a question that I'd like everybody to answer in a very short, soundbite kind of way. What and where do you see technology playing a role in the cannabis industry? And maybe everybody can give a very brief introduction of what they do and how that's important as well.
Well, hello, everybody. I liked what Lisa just said, said something about us all needing to work together. We are integrating things, we are integrating technologies, and you talk about the technology. I think this is the perfect place to say that we can all drive this forward, both on the product as well as the technologies used to actually grow cannabis. And so this is a very interesting topic, and I'm very happy that she brought that up. We're in this unique place that we can all work together. And I love that opportunity. Technology in itself can help us create new products, new chemicals,
Well, Mark,
plants.
can you tell them what you're in grow tech, right? What does that mean exactly?
So we grow, create facilities to grow cannabis and fruit and vegetables, and we think about sustainability. As my mission, I belong to the 60 plus that the previous speaker talked about. I want to make the world a better place for my children and all of your children. And so sustainability is one of those possibilities that we want to push in order to have a more sustainable world. And that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so I'm going to actually bounce over here to Lucas because he's also in grow tech, although from the American perspective. Where do you see technology playing a role in grow tech, and how does that use, and why is that cool?
Sure. So, I think it's a very broad question, but it is something that is very important to the industry moving forward. And I think a lot of times what we look at is new technology, and it's not necessarily that we always need to focus on the new technology on the cultivation side of things. It's also addressing new ways to address old challenges, right? And I think in the cannabis industry, we have a lot of what we referred to earlier as the black market. I like to consider it as the legacy growers, right? Is understanding where they came from, this plant, and really how we learn from that and build it into a commercial optimized scale so that we can have a consistent quality product going forward for both the medical and for the adult use markets.
So Zia, you're also coming to this from a very different role with some very, very new technology used in new ways. But generally, what do you think technology is going to mean to the cannabis industry from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. We are coming also from software development, and we were developing different technologies in fintech and healthcare technology. And we saw that the industry is in need of new technologies from the software technology perspective. And that's why there is a huge perspective just to move forward and to develop new technologies in the software. There are a lot of done, but much more can be done in cannabis industry.
Well, actually, you're using a technology, artificial intelligence, and you're not the only one up here that's going to be using AI. Can anybody else talk about why AI specifically is going to be very, very useful to this industry in several different ways? I mean, maybe starting with sales, right?
Yeah, I mean, just short, Hello Mary is a traditional e-commerce platform. What we did, we developed AI-based voice assistant. which brings the level of their customer journey in different level, whether you don't have to, and all information which is in the web or in their, let's say, data, they will be given to customers or to doctors or to just the person who is looking information very fast. That's what we see the technologies, to bring new technologies to the industry to help and contribute.
So what about you, Tobias? You're coming this from something a little bit different, nanotech, which is really out there. But what does Cannatech mean to you?
Oh, nanotech sounds extremely fancy, many thanks. To come back to the start, technology is always an answer for a problem. And 3 years ago, we defined a problem. Our visionary founder, Mr. Torge Debus, defined a problem, and that is the low bioavailability of cannabinoids. And there was an answer in the scientific literature. Drug delivery systems predominantly used in the pharmaceutical field. And we adapted this technology to make a carrier system that helps your body absorb cannabinoids faster, to a higher extent, and with longer lasting effects. And one thing, we combine our carrier systems with synergistic combinations of active ingredients to get specific effects with high bioavailability cannabinoids.
So I think you can see that everybody up here is using technology in different ways to make their jobs easier. As my late uncle Peter Drucker used to say, technology is great, but it's just a tool. And if it doesn't achieve your ends, then don't use it. But let's do a little bit more of a deep dive into some of the specifics. What I'd like to focus on is, what exactly is grow tech? Is it about the breeding of the plants? Is it about the building? Is it about the tracking tech? Is it about automation? Is it about sustainability? The two grow tech guys, how does that work?
Sure. So I think there's really two silos that really fits in. The first is going to be in automation, as you mentioned, and that's really in terms of driving down the cost of production, producing a very consistent, clean, quality product by leveraging that automation on the front end of the cultivation side of things. The other silo is really going to be on the technical side in terms of data, right? So how are we actually growing these plants? What are the climates that it's thriving in, and what are the climates that are creating stress and informs for pest, disease, pathogens, things like that, right? So I think it really comes down to how we gather that data, how we translate that into information, and then use that into insight for our growing needs. Well,
this is great because we've got an American grow tech and a German grow tech. So I'm going to also then throw this out to Mark. How do you see this kind of technology aiding in the assistance of, say, meeting high compliance standards like EU GMP or GACP or sustainability, et cetera, et cetera?
The wonderful thing about technology is that you can combine what nature gives you, for example, the sun, with the technology to control the environment to make plants happy. In the end, we all want happy plants because they give us the best product. And so the question is, how do we make the best combination? With that, we can use AI to control the climate, to pick the right cultivars, to grow the best plants in the shortest amount of time to make the most amount of money. And that is a business conference here, and so we're trying to do the best we can with the technologies that are out there, and then we're developing and pushing these technologies that don't only apply to cannabis, they will also spill over, which is really exciting, partly in the food industry and food production, as well as into climate control, et cetera, for housing, for example, and skyscrapers and all of that. So this industry is driving a lot of parts in our society, and it is exciting that we have the opportunity to be part of this forefront of a new technology that is emerging.
Well, I think there's a theme here, which is that technology is being combined. So I'm going to throw this back to Zia, who Hello Mary is actually, uses AI to create a customer journey that is really different. And I think, in general, AI is like the future of sales in general. But why is it so important to use something like, say, medically trained AI and cannabis in a sales application?
As I mentioned, we are our team coming from healthcare. Digital healthcare, and when we see their perspective of using, as we discussed before, data, using AI or new technologies in cannabis will give us much knowledge to develop current market, to develop new instruments for medical cannabis. I mean, medical cannabis is a next kind of, there will be a fusion of the digital technologies with medical cannabis. That's one of the products we are developing as well, where we'll have the data will be used explicitly for that purposes. Now we're working also with one software, developing with one software where we'll get medical data from wearable devices. This is part of our product development, and that information will give customer, will be kind of a bridge in the telemedicine between patient and a doctor. If the doctors want to see how the specific cannabis or dose or strain affects to the patient. That's, I believe, it's a new future, and we're also working on that.
So I want to flip back over to Tobias. Can you tell us in layman's terms what exactly nanotechnology is?
I'm relatively sure I can try. Basically, if you're in a certain size range, below 500 nanometers, depending on the definition, then people speak about nanoparticles, nanomaterials. And if you have sizes that low, then some physical parameters change, giving interesting opportunities for new technologies.
So when are you using this with what, bioavailability? Can you give us a sense of what you're using nanotechnology for?
Again, I try my very best. Let's start with the term bioavailability. It describes the fraction of active substance that you take in that is actually absorbed by your body, in contrast to the amount of substance that you take in and that is metabolized and released without being used. And for CBD, the official WHO number is 6%, meaning more than 90% of the CBD you take in simply goes to waste, is not used by your body. And this is where we come in with our technologies. We help your body with absorbing cannabinoids and other active ingredients by transporting them in nanoscale lipid carrier systems.
Okay, what does that mean in English, right?
Milk is an emulsion. Two immeasurable liquids homogeneously dispersed. Now you have an oil droplet and you make it really, really, really small, 50 nanometers. You fill this oil droplets with cannabinoids and stabilize it with a so-called emulsifier.
So that's like mayonnaise, basically, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And those small particles, they give the active ingredient a huge surface between oil and water, and they help these active substances to transfer into the aqueous phase, for example, in your saliva or into your gastrointestinal tract, and provide a huge surface for absorption by mucosal membrane.
So it makes everything more efficient, basically, right?
You can sum it up with that word, yeah.
Awesome. So the next thing that I'd like to get to is the idea of technology in personalized medicine, which I think everybody up here is involved in some way. And we were actually talking about this in the green room. I mean, when it gets to that point, obviously you'd be able to have a system where you can find the best medication that you need and maybe back that into a plant which is growing, a greenhouse or an indoor grow which is growing for people who need that. And then it's put into some sort of, high absorption nanotechnology. But where do you see personalized medicine, cannabis, and technology crossing? And how?
Good question, actually. That's exactly where we say AI can play a big role to find personalization of and finding a product that the customer or patients are looking for. And we just observe how high tech is developing in not only in software, also in the hardware, in cannabis hardware. Yeah, I mean, we were discussing a few days about this high tech vaporizers, just to find the personal dosage or personal use, how they can help. That's, I believe, not only software but also hardware will be playing an important role, because other industries they're already using. It's just have to get more attention. And I believe with the legalizations will be more attention to bring available on the market technologies to the cannabis industry.
Lucas, you're coming from the American market, which is very, very different. Can you see a time when, say, in Colorado, there's going to be a section of greenhouses that can grow your own personalized medicine? Is that feasible, viable? How far away is that?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I think what it really comes down to is driving two things: is the genetics, right, and the cannabinoid profile that comes from this plant, and specific genetics, and the consistency and the cultivation therein, right. As we refine our practices downstream of harvesting, we need to ensure that the product that we're producing before that harvest is consistent, right, and we have a consistent basis that we're building for this post-harvest processing as it gets more complex, right? And if we are going to, which I absolutely believe, enter more of a medicinal market that's specific to each patient, and we can hone in on those different aspects of different genetics and different cannabinoids, the cultivation absolutely needs to be dialed in. And that's where we really need to leverage that technology, that automation, and those systems to really refine that environment, right? And then build this genetic code within the plant as we cultivate it all the way through harvest, so that everyone on the back end can use that precision to really refine it to each patient's needs.
So from Colorado to Germany, can you see personalized medicine within an EU GMP framework? And how do you think that might work and be aided by technology?
Well, we're happy that GMP and GACP is going to be pushed. It helps us all to create better plants, healthier plants, and have a consistent process. And we're all into that. We also have the possibility using AI to actually looking at the chemicals and how to infect these chemicals by changing the climate, just like Lucas has said that. The beautiful thing is, for me as a chemical engineer, like the old saying, you give a kid a hammer and everything looks like a nail. But once you are a chemical engineer, you look at the plant not as a plant necessarily, but a chemical factory. So which changes can I make to the environment to create the changes in the plant that I would love to see? We need people like Tobias to tell us what they need and how to actually deliver those chemicals. And it's an exciting prospect to change things still holistically, not talking about isolating one specific chemical, but having still a plant that creates a holistic medicine. And so in that scale, you have to use massive amount of data to actually create what you need to do, and that takes technology.
So Tobias, I want to sort of get into some of this, because I think that nano is absolutely on the front end of personalized medicine. Can you talk a little bit about not just the nanotechnology, but things like patches and the things that you're doing to bring cannabis as personalized medicine into a medical stream that can be used?
Talking about a vision, yes, many thanks. What is important for personalized medicine, I would say, is that you control which substances you give a person. Okay, this is quite clear, but how much is applied? And if you look at the body as an individual system, it is hard to control how much of a substance is really absorbed, taken in, and there comes nanotechnology in play. And especially what you mentioned, patches. With patches, you can control how much substance is applied to a person. With the right combination of substances according to the needs of a specific patient, you have personalized medicine at the right amount over the right amount of time.
That's awesome. So a lot of you guys were mentioning data. So now the next question is, what is the role of regulation and compliance within tech? And GDPR is just one of them, but would anyone like to take that one on first?
I can take a stab at it. So we work pretty heavily on the GACP and GMP side of things, largely with our LP clients up in Canada and with some of the clients we work out here, out in Europe with. And the large portion of that is in the process flow, right, of how people, plants, and products move throughout these facilities and tracking that. A lot of GMP compliance and GACP compliance come with a chain of commands, right, understanding really what happens in these facilities and what happens to this plant throughout its growth stages, and leveraging technology to gather that data so that we can create that chain of commands, right, and we can show that very clearly throughout from seed all the way through sale.
So Zia, I mean, this is also an issue, right? So your system is going to be using AI, but potentially can be pushed to very personal devices and wearable devices. Do you see privacy and GDPR being an issue? And beyond that, what other regulatory issues do you see crossing into this space?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. I mean, we are a German-based company, but the reason why we are going actually to start at the US, of course, it's the biggest market. Another reason is because of the regulations. I mean, European GDPR regulations does not really allow personal assistant to suggest you a product. That's a big problem with voice assistant. We can get to that. It's like medical device license. We can get to that, and we are planning to go for that. But in the beginning, it's US is more liberal market for that. Of course, there are their own limitations. I mean, we are talking about recreational and medical cannabis in US. There are not only government limitations, but also different corporate limitations or banking limitations, what we are facing once we're going to such market. But we feel how it changes. That really, I mean, recently, from our perspective, for instance, Apple was not really supporting cannabis-based applications. Recently, they just issued that they are welcoming now applications which are considering also cannabis. So we observe the change how not only legislation is changing, but also corporate policies changing in the positive side, which is good.
So I want to come back now to Tobias. Nano is interesting in and of itself, right? Especially in Europe, and it potentially could really sort of stretch the edges of things. Maybe you can explain a little bit how that might be, or in terms of, I mean, if you're using a new kind of technology like nano, and it's delivering cannabinoids into the cellular level, I mean, you're starting to talk about manufacturing at a cellular level in a human body, which is pretty wild, right? I mean, and that's also pressing, certainly in Europe, there are all sorts of laws that discuss those things. Can you comment on that and sort of where you see your technology developing in a strange regulatory space just because of the unusualness of the technology and how it impacts the human body?
Yeah, interesting question. Give me just a few minutes and I'll answer in 2 points. First, the definition of a nanomaterial given by the EU regulatory. Now, the framework is, the definition is if you're below 100 nanometers, if you have a solid, and if it is not biodegradable, then you have a technically produced nanomaterial. And this needs extra testing, safety standards, so on and so on, which is needed. If you have a nanoscale metal inside of one of your cells, it can cause oxidative stress, inflammation, degradation of proteins, all sort of problems that you do not want to have. Now, for our systems, they are in the range below 100 nanometers, our carrier systems, but they are liquids and they are absolutely biodegradable because we build them with regular food ingredients, plant oils, lecithin as emulsifier, and some other substances. And those particles, they don't cross the barrier of your cells. They don't really go into your cells. They help active fat-soluble substances to be transported into your cells. It's a different way of transportation. So we are not producing nanomaterials according to EU regulations, and there is no harm in our carrier systems because they follow the after releasing the active ingredients they transport, they follow the standard route of digestion.
So I'm going to throw out another one, because that's actually, for those of you who've been wandering around outside, there's a really cool 3D printed personal oil maker, which is pretty cool. But I want to sort of come back into this idea of 3D printing. How and where do you see 3D printing making an impact on this industry generally, and why and where? Maybe we'll start with Tobias. I mean, could you 3D print your patch?
To be honest, I have no idea.
Okay, that's fine. Is anybody else like on the construction side or the greenhouse side? Where can you see 3D printing playing a role or not?
I mean, I think it would be tough. I think where you may be able to see it is maybe in sensor technology, possibly, to where you have, you know, a small, let's say, something similar to a Raspberry Pi, right, where you could build a modular around that and be able to mass produce that off a 3D printer. You know, there's, you know, especially in our world, we try to streamline everything we can when we're building out these facilities so that there's not very customizable, very hard to get pieces and parts. But in the event that there are, that is a lot of times where 3D printing can be leveraged.
Awesome. We want to throw this open to the audience. So if anybody has questions, can you put your hand up and we'll try and get a mic to you? Anybody now? We have already a question here.
Oh, there you are. I didn't see you. I should wear my glasses more often. Hold on. Here we go.
Well, first, thanks a lot for the insight. It was super interesting. I would like to go further, or a bit further into, I guess it's more the field where Tobias is active. Because like you've been talking about cultivation and this is about distribution and so on, I would be interested in what perspective or potential would you see for new technologies in certain like drug development, like new stuff like you do basically, you know, nanotechnology or whatever. Do you think there would also be possibilities to improve, I don't know, whatever you name it, flowers or different new extracts, or do you see other potentials of technology in making new cannabis drugs? I didn't only ask you, by the way, like you all can answer.
Anybody, I think, could ask to answer that one, I think.
Yeah, I believe it can have a huge impact. I mean, if you look at the growing or using technology in growing, it can be, you know, from the light that's adopted from the air climate which is adopted, and we heard a lot about AI being used in not only optimizing, but that's also optimizing grow. I mean, if you go to the more, we were discussing yesterday with one company here also that they are trying to communicate with the plant and crack and manipulate the growth. Yeah, that's more or less by cracking the growth of the plant. I guess there's a lot has been done in other plants, and again, it will come. It's coming, and will be entering to cannabis growing as well. Yeah, and it.
I'd like to answer that too. I want to add that we're now at about production cost of a kilogram of the highest flower quality that you can buy at about 500 euro per kilogram. And I don't know if that's a high or low number around here. I would assume that for the highest quality that you can buy, that is a pretty decent price for production, all in, meaning facility and depreciation, all of that in. That number will come down because there are new technologies that will reduce the price of growing, and it will increase the yields. Both of those are happening. They're continuously happening. AI adds to that, so that that number will come down. In part, it has to, because prices will come down too. Not quite as fast, but we are looking at that at any time. It's always, how can we produce better at a lower price? And technology, in fact, we could go into many different ones. It comes from the water delivery system, nutrient delivery system. That's all, anything about knowledge about the temperature and humidity in your grow facility, the drying process. All of that is continuously evolving. We have never built two of the same facilities because there's always new things coming, and it's really, really exciting. And what other place can you go where you can just continuously innovate, and that's fun. So thank you for that question.
There's a question here.
Yeah, it's a comment on the whole 3D printing discussion. My name is Peter. I'm from the Danish company Drizzle, and we create small extractors designed for personal use, so the end user can do their own customized, personalized cannabis oil. And we've managed to get a complete extraction system down to this size, about 2 kilograms, and doing so has required a few innovative steps, and one of them has to do with plastic and 3D printing. Now, we've really investigated into using plastic instead of stainless steel, because stainless steel is super expensive to work with, and it's kind of the go-to thing when you do chemical processing. But we figured out how to use plastic in chemical harsh environments, and once that was in place, and we could do that in a food-safe environment, the next obvious state for us at least was to do the entire thing using 3D print. And that has actually led to some really interesting derivative advantages in what we're doing. And there's specifically 3 things when it comes to 3D printing and 3D printing in production that we've discovered. And the first one is innovation speed. When you do stuff in stainless steel, you need to have someone do the drawings, you need to mill something out, you need to test it and ship it, blah, 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 blah. It's expensive and takes usually up to a month. If you 3D print, you can sit down over a coffee table, sketch something out, print it, test it in the evening, figure out what's wrong with it, and next cycle the next day. So instead of having iterative cycles of 1 month, you're down to 1 day. So it really supercharges your innovation speed.
I'm actually going to interrupt you here for a second, but I mean, that actually, I was showing that product to a GMP distributor here in Germany, and his first comment was, yeah, it's really cool, it's 3D printed, but actually that's technically illegal here in Germany, right? So, I mean, that's one of those areas where I think that, I mean, as much as, I mean, it's a personal discussion, right? If you're going to make canna butter in your microwave versus using your, your system. But I mean, that's, I think, a place where technology is also crossing into a new regulatory environment, so people can actually make oil at home more easily. But how does that then become a standard that the medical environment, that the medical community can accept? Those are many, many different questions, I think, that's coming together with your product. So I'd like to sort of, we'll come back to you, but what I'd like to do is sort of open it up to other questions here, unless you had another point to make.
I had 2 quick points I'd like to make, and the second one was size, because when you 3D print stuff, you can put in details that are impossible to make with other production methods, and that means that you can shrink both size and cost of your products, and that's important when you do consumer products. And the final thing is production, because it's quite easy to set up scalable production facilities with 3D print. You just need a bunch of 3D printers. So you can set up clusters. Let's say we want to produce in the US. You can just set up printing farm in the US, Asia, and just send files, and you have the exact same production globally. So you kind of have a global and local approach to production. That's really interesting to work with. So.
Okay, so I'm going to have a quick round robin here, and I'd like you guys to do this like really fast. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities of technology in this industry? Like a sentence.
For me, it's AI and the appropriate use to develop better methods to grow.
Generally, research science is awesome. We need to find out more new things. It's frustrating because often things don't work, and it's expensive because it takes time. And it's challenging to explain to future customers or partners why it is necessary to do research when you do not know what will be the outcome.
I think it's keeping focused on the goal ahead, not reinventing the wheel, and leveraging parallel industries to further this cannabis industry into the future.
I believe right now legislation and limitations, that's a big challenge for Cannatech to be developed in the level where it can be developed, not only in tech, but in general in cannabis industry. I see that's the biggest challenge, actually.
Are there any more questions? Okay, so I'm going to actually or maybe our last question. What do you see the role of technology in research and development of new drugs generally, if not the advancement of understanding of cannabis?
Sure, I can start off. So yeah, my background's actually in commercial vegetable production before I started growing cannabis, and I think a lot what needs to be focused on now is largely on the cultivation side, but more specifically is on the genetic side of things. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around really what these genetics are and what sort of cannabinoids they produce and what sort of environments produce those cannabinoids of that genetic, right? And so I think a lot of it needs to be focused on gene editing and understanding these genetic codes that we have and the cultivation systems we use to identify these things and bring them out in this product. It's an amazing flower that we have, but it really comes down to the cultivation side of things and the environment that you put that plant in to allow those genes to come out.
Okay, last call. Any more questions from the audience? No? If you have burning questions, you can look us up later. But what I'd like to do is end just a little bit quickly, unless anybody would like to have last closing comments generally about technology or what you are doing with technology that's cool and awesome that we need to know about.
I'll say.
Go.
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot here, but automation. So I love automation. When push comes to shove, the industry needs to commercialize and it needs to optimize itself, and that comes down to, as Mark was referring to, is cost production. We really need to adopt things that we've learned from our Dutch partners in terms of bringing plants to people and not people to plants. Right? We need to limit our human touching as much as this is a very artistic thing. That is for you to do at home, right? But when we're doing this on a medical platform, on a commercial platform, we really need to leverage technology and automation and those systems therein to create a consistent quality product for the globe. And I think that's really where we focus on at Urban Grow is leveraging that technology, those systems, and integrating them all together.
Zia, do you have any last comments there about?
I guess we mentioned already that we see new technologies being part of the industry, and software development and hardware development will be one of the main stuff which will be happening. Yeah.
This side, anybody?
I think what I'm seeing is that we're still only maybe 10% of the way of where technologies will go in the following years. We made a lot of progress, but there's so many new things happening every single week, and that's to do with lights and nutrients and everything. This industry will change, and it's exciting to see it change and get better. And I think that certainly, and with fewer diseases, fewer pest pressure, it will get a lot better and healthier over time.
Would you like the last word here?
The exact last word. We need more science, we need more research in this field. We need to solve the problems and not just ignore them. And I think we all need to be curious and excited about what we do and try to improve ourselves.
Okay, well, I think that's it, unless one last call for questions. No? Thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for all being part of the panel.